Hello, all, and welcome. My name is Michael Seelman. I'm the CEO of the Leadership Coach Group, and I'm really excited to share with you our latest webinar and our open coaching webinar series to bring leadership lessons to you from our very talented team of coaches and presenters. And today we're going to focus on Ditch the Superhero Cape, Self-Compassion for High-Performing Leaders, presented by our very own Jen Bieri. And she's got a wonderful intent that she's bringing to this webinar that she was just sharing with us. So we're really excited to have her share with you. And what we're going to ask you to do to check in with us is to let us know where you're joining us from. And if you could drop one word in the chat that describes how you're feeling today, that would be terrific. So you maybe your name, city you're calling in from, and one word that describes how you're feeling today. We just want to know, how you're showing up today, how you're feeling as we start our webinar. We're hopefully going to tick that up a notch to an even better feeling by the end of our webinar. So excited to have you join us. If you're joining us on multiple different platforms on LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook, you should be able to find a chat feature or comment feature, and we'd love to hear where you're calling in from. If you could share that with us and how you're feeling today. Just one word is all we're asking. I'll say I'm feeling great, Jen. I'm really pumped by what you shared in your intent, and I'm excited to hear the content that you'll share because I think it'll be really beneficial. We had, when we sent out our messaging for this webinar, people wrote back how much it resonated with them, how much they were looking forward to it, and we had really great registration. So I'm excited and really anticipating what you're going to share with our audience. We'll see what we've got in the chat from folks. So we have Carl on our team joining us from the Philippines. We have someone also joining from Manila. We have Dimitri from Calgary in Alberta, Canada. Great to have you with us, Dimitri. Thanks so much for joining us. One of my Harvard classmates actually was the mayor of Calgary, Nahid. I don't know if you remember when he was your mayor, so say hello to Nahid if you run into him for me. So it's really wonderful to have you. Again, if you so inclined, please share in the chat where you're calling in from and one word that shows up how you're feeling today. And Dimitri's word was excited with an exclamation mark. So thank you, Dimitri, for that. So let's look at this webinar series. We're going to explore it a little bit more. So what is open coaching? Well, we have rotating hosts and themes. Now, what's consistent is that it's every month, the first Friday of the month at noon Eastern time. And it features a variety of experts that share their leadership excellence. And that's part of our mission of the Leadership Coach Group, is to share and improve the practice of leadership through what we have to share. And we try to provide actionable insights that you can implement right away. And we also offer a playbook, put that in quotes there, a playbook that helps you get more in depth with the content and do some reflection exercises. So Jen's going to present some content, and if you want to dive deeper in after the webinar, that playbook's a great resource for you. And we also give people an opportunity to be coached, so that we hope that you'll be able to volunteer and be coached live on this webinar with Jen. So I want you to think about doing that now. Think about if you could volunteer, and maybe you want to share with Jen a challenge you're having and working through and providing yourself with self-compassion, how you can do that. She'd be happy to work through it with you. And also want to mention, Dimitri says he is familiar with Nahid, and also we have Richard from Winnipeg, Manitoba joining us. Welcome, Richard. Thanks for joining us. And Richard, if you have one word you'd like to share about how you're feeling, we'd love to hear it. Thank you for signing in there. So let's tell you more about the playbook I mentioned. So we're going to have a self-compassion leadership playbook that'll be sent to you, or a link that you can click on to get to it. And it has guided exercise, reflection prompts, has lots of leadership insights, and best of all, it's free and easy to use. So we encourage you to take advantage of that resource. And for those of you who would like additional services from us, we provide, as a leadership coach group, one-on-one coaching. We provide a variety of team effectiveness services, such as leadership training and also team coaching and motivational speakers, as well as leadership assessments. So you can kind of see how you're showing up as a leader, and then we can help tailor our resources to some challenges you may be having as a leader. So we have some comprehensive services to support you. And so we encourage you to reach out if that either now or sometime in the future that you might want our assistance. We'd be happy to do a free consultation with you to talk about it. And our leaders, our coaches have leaders themselves, and they serve leaders at a variety of large, small, medium-sized company, and also nonprofits and government agencies. What we have up on the screen are some of the large companies, the global brands you might recognize, where our coaches have served leaders at. And many people, when they join a webinar, me included, are like, oh, am I going to get the notes from this webinar? Will I get this copy of the slides? Will I get that resource? How will I get it? Well, after this session, you will get an email, and that will tell you about how to get a complimentary coaching session from Jen after this webinar, also how to get a copy of our playbook, and also the slide deck of the what Jen will present today. And also want to mention, in case you don't get that email or you're looking for it right away, it'll be on our website, and you can go there and find those resources as well. So now, without further ado, I want to introduce to you our speaker, Jen Bieri. She's an executive coach with a decade of global experience in finance, operations, and scaling high-growth startups. She's lived it, she's done it. She's a former corporate leader who built and led teams across Australia, Singapore, Canada, and supporting a $50 million acquisition. She calls herself a recovering CPA. We've joked about that many times. She's passionate about creating a reflective space for high performers to turn inward, to reflect, to lead with an intention, and achieve sustainable success. And she was named one of Canada's emerging leaders list, like kind of a top 40 under 40. And she was recognized just in the past few years for the impact she's having to her coaching practice and some of the work she's done in the past. So I also, Jen, if you would, I would love you to share the intent you did during our pre-session with the audience. I thought that was beautiful what you shared. And she comes to this topic very authentically. I think she's going to share her personal journey. So I hope you really tune in, and she's someone that's going to speak from the heart and try to help people that might be in a situation where she's been in the past. So Jen, it's my great pleasure to turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. And thank you everyone for coming and joining live. I saw Dimo's on the call. So hey, Dimo. Hey, Richard. I'm so happy to see some people posting in the chat, which is always helpful for me. And yeah, this is so my intention is, when we started putting together this webinar and talking about ditching the superhero cape and self-compassion, this is honestly such a huge topic for me, because I'm a recovering CPA. I also call myself a recovering superhero. And I just, when I started coming across self-compassion work, which was last year, it was really, it gave me a lot of hope, actually, because a lot of, we're going to be talking so much about inner critics and saboteurs and those kinds of things, but that was the first time I found a framework that actually worked for me. And it was like, oh, you mean like there's something that can actually help me, like not all these other ones that are just constantly making me feel bad. And so I guess my intention for this is, I hope that you leave inspired. I hope you leave feeling a little more hopeful, and maybe just building a little bit more awareness on some of the tools and techniques and different things that might actually work for you, because there are so many techniques, so many tools out there, and it can kind of leave you feeling deflated if they don't work for you. So anyways, hopefully you can take something away from this and maybe just feel a little less alone in all these things. So yeah, okay. So I'm going to keep going. So the first thing that I want to do is I know that this is a bit of a webinar, which is always a little bit tough for me because I love engagement and I really feed off of that. And so if you are here live, please use the chat. It helps me out a lot to know that you're in the audience and to know that there are people here and that we can connect. And so please use the chat. One thing to just note is because of the system that we're using, there is a bit of a lag. So if you do post in the chat and we didn't comment on it right away or something like that, it's probably just because there's a delay. And so once we see it, we'll kind of address it or just find a good time to put it in. These webinars, I know it sounds like it's a really great time to do double duty where you can do emails and do text messages and all that. And so I highly recommend turning it on focus mode so you can be here and be with us live. Because otherwise, what's the point? Let's be present. And then the last thing is all questions are welcome. So if we're talking about something or I'm talking about something and it doesn't make sense to you, or maybe you have a new perspective on it or something you want to throw in, use the chat. So if you've heard nothing else, then use the chat. And I want to hear a little bit from you. So what are, you signed up, you're here live, time is so valuable. What are you hoping to take away from today's webinar? This question just also helps me. We obviously have tons of content prepared, but what it does do is it helps me just make sure that, we're answering your questions and make sure we can tailor it a little bit for you too. How to be kinder to myself. I love that, Carl. Okay, and while we're waiting for those two, I forgot we're doing this grounding technique. So this will kind of also help center us and get us here. And so this is, if you actually attended the webinar that I did last year, we used the same grounding technique. I really love this one, especially for more, I would say professional settings, because if you're at your office, you're sitting at your desk, it might be weird to close your eyes. And so I find this is kind of a one that can help you get grounded. And it's something that you can use with your teams. It's something that you can use just for yourself. Maybe you're in a meeting and no one sees that. And actually, before I do that, I see Richard commented. So you want to learn how you want to learn how you could have been coached as an executive to prevent the dramatic crash I experienced early in 2026. Ooh, thanks for being so vulnerable and honest, Richard. I so appreciate that. And I hear you. I also had a dramatic crash, not in 2026, but mine was about 4 years ago. So I hope there's some tips in here for you. And Demo, a reminder that you don't need to do it all yourself and that you can rely on others and you can help and empower others as well. Absolutely. I hope we talk about that. I know we're going to talk about that. So thank you both so much for commenting in the chat. And so let's do our grounding technique together. So this one is one, please don't overthink it. Just kind of like pick what you can. And if you can't find the number that we have here, just let it go. So there's no way to do this perfectly. So the first thing we're going to do is I want you to look around and find 5 things that you can see and just name them in your mind. So just as you see them, just do that. And then you're going to find 4 things that you can touch. And if you feel like it, you can actually just like go out and touch them. So like I'm touching my laptop as an example. And now think about 3 things that you can hear. You can count my voice as one of them if you want. Now 2 things that you can smell. I always find this one a little hard. And then 1 thing that you can taste. And then let's just take a moment to just notice if you feel any differently after doing that. And if you do, feel free to throw it in the chat. And if you don't, feel free to throw it in the chat. There's no right or wrong. Okay, so we're going to be covering quite a lot in this webinar. So the first one is we're going to be talking a lot about the inner critic. and just about how it could be limiting your performance and your leadership and just kind of gain a better understanding around it. We're also going to be talking about self-compassion and the three elements. We'll be talking about interrupting self-critical thinking patterns and how all of these things build greater resilience and that they help you lead others with more empathy. So let's jump in. Bottom line, we're going to start thinking about how to ditch the superhero cape. So the superhero cape for me worked for a really long time, or at least I thought I did. And so when I worked in tech, I worked there for 5 years. It was like an absolute roller coaster ride of a journey. I loved it. And I was known as the glue. The CEO actually called me the stopgap because I was the person that like would make sure that nothing was actually hitting the floor, because it was like this deadline happened and we had to make this thing happen and that thing happen. I was the one kind of juggling all these plates, and everyone relied on me. And the other thing that I want to tell you is this wasn't just professionally, this was happening personally in my life everywhere. So this is just sort of what I did. And what it meant was I was taking on all problems, even the ones that weren't mine. And by doing this, I was really embodying the superhuman persona. I felt like I could do anything. I was unstoppable. And I'll be honest, in many ways, I really was. And I think this is why I flew up the corporate ladder as fast as I did. I was getting promoted every 6 months to 2 years. In a 10-year period, I ended up as the head of business operations for a global organization. And I loved it. Like the high of it, the challenge of it, all of it, I loved it. But then I realized it was not working for me. And so, Richard, you're talking about crashing and burning. This is kind of what happened to me. So, I was wearing my superhero cape, and then I think it just shredded to bits, and I didn't know because I was really a shell of who I was. So, people had known me as being very bubbly and having a lot of energy and, being really kind. And I was like, if you had seen me 5 years ago, I don't even think you would recognize me because I was a shell of who I was. And I had become so hyper independent that I didn't even know how to let other people support me. And if I'm being completely honest with you, I didn't trust anybody either. And again, I'm going to reiterate, this wasn't just professionally, this also was personally. And all of this, holding all of these things, eventually completely burnt me out. And so 4 years later, I now realize that it was completely unsustainable. And I was also contributing to this unsustainable cycle of reactive toxic leadership, which is a big part of what I advocate against in terms of creating more sustainable practices for leadership, in terms of being healthier and still being ambitious, because I think that's a really important part of all this. And so to me, wearing the superhero cape meant being superhuman. It meant feeling like I didn't make mistakes. It meant feeling like I could fix anything. It meant just feeling like I could go in and just save everything and everyone. And for me, when I came across the work of self-compassion, it really allowed me to see my own humanity. And that was a really big piece of the puzzle that I didn't realize was missing. And the other thing it did was it gave me permission to take off my superhero cape. And now I joke that it's sitting up in the closet right beside me collecting dust. And my goal is to have it collect as much dust as possible because I don't want to be taking it out. And so I'm curious, how many superheroes or recovering superheroes do we have live with us today? And if you're catching the recording and you can't put an emoji of, we're thinking about you, but I'd love to just hear if anybody kind of relates to this concept so far. And just like could be an emoji, could be whatever you want in the chat. Yeah, thanks, Richard. You're right, it does, right? Because, often these patterns that we create, they don't just happen in work, they happen in everything. One of the things that I love is as I moved more into coaching, so I'm a coactive coach, a coactive trained coach. And one of the things that they talk about is that we're a whole person. So, you can't really take the person out of the work and you can't really take the work out of the person because all things impact everything. And so, yes, you're a humbled superhero. I love that. And Demo 100% definitely resonates and mirrors some of the same experiences you've had. Yeah, it's absolutely a reminder we're not alone, right? But we think we are. And I think that's kind of like with the superhero mentality is we feel like we're alone because in a way we can handle it, or we think we can handle it, or we have handled it. Okay. Now I'm also going to tell you a lot of the stuff that we're covering today. If I had seen this 5 years ago, I think I thought it was fluff. I thought it was like, there's no way this stuff works. Being an accountant, being a little bit more analytical and logical minded. I, I mean, when people would talk about things like self-compassion and soft skills and these kinds of things, I probably would have laughed and I probably would have just walked away. And the reason why I'm sharing what I'm sharing with you today is because these are the tools that actually worked for me. And so if you do still think they're fluff, that's okay too. It might just be this is not the right tool for you or whatever. Now, I want to start with talking a little bit about the inner critic and that there are so many different ways to sort of work with your inner critic. And I think it's really important because of a few things. One, we're going to be talking a lot about self-compassion today because I've already said that that's the one that really works for me, but it may not work for you. And I want to normalize that that's absolutely fine and that there's just so many other different tools to look at. So naming and personification. So being in coactive talks a lot about saboteurs and talks a lot about like naming and personifying. So what that would be is like you create a character out of it. So you use your imagination. So you might be like, my saboteur looks like Winnie the Pooh, except he's blue and actually sounds like Tinkerbell or whatever. So you're like, creating this very visual image of what it could look like. There's also recognizing its voice. So for some people, their inner critic or their saboteur might sound like somebody. So it might sound like their mom, or maybe it sounds like your grandfather or somebody else who might have been really influential in your life. It's another sort of way to look at this is positive intelligence. So there's a huge body of work around positive intelligence and saboteurs. And I can't remember how many they have. I'm going to just say it's like 12. They've got like 12 different saboteurs that are very detailed and talk through lots of different things. And so they have ones like the stickler, the perfectionist, and they have ones like the one that's hyper vigilant. And so they're very, very detailed. There's also parts work, which is like internal family systems, which is all about, recognizing that you're a whole, but there might be like a part of you that, is seeing things differently. Perhaps it broke off from the whole of you. Like maybe there's one side of you that really wants to have ease, and there's another part of you that loves challenge, so like just two conflicting parts. And then there's self-compassion, which is a little bit more around self-kindness, mindfulness, and recognizing your own humanity. Yeah, self-compassion is so important. It is so important. Yeah, thanks, Richard. Okay. So the reason why self-compassion specifically worked for me is because my inner critic isn't a voice. So when I was going through coaching school and I'm learning all of these things about saboteurs and about, inner critic, and everyone's like, what does it sound like? Like, can you personify it? What's the character? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, I don't think I have an inner critic. I'm like, because I don't hear it, which, isn't true. But for me, what I've realized is mine is more of like a feeling. So I put a lot of pressure on myself. And so I know my inner critic is active because my shoulders move up to my ears. I might be like starting to creep more and more towards my camera. I start getting really stressed. I might not even be able to fully identify what the stress is, but it's not a voice. The other thing is I found with some of the other ways and frameworks, it was activating my nervous system because it was too detailed. So it was going so hyper into, what did it sound like? What did it feel like? Let's like really create and sort of put it in a box. And I don't really love being put in a box on a good day. And so for me, it just felt really like it was just activating my nervous system and it triggered me. And so instead of being something that was helpful and brought awareness, it was something that just made me really cranky. And then the last one is it's more positively focused. So self-compassion isn't so much about analyzing all of the why and the who and figuring it out, but really it is more about being present with what is being positive about it, and then sort of, moving forward from that place. It's so funny, Richard. Your inner critic, that you never listened to it. That's good that you didn't listen to it. I'm so curious about what your inner critic is like. So for the inner critic, inner critic, and I use, voice in quotes here because, I can't hear mine, but it's basically the voice underneath your superhero cape. It's, the voice or the pressure or the something that's sort of creating this feeling that you have to be a superhero. And so a couple things about your inner critic is that everyone has one. And so again, it could be a voice, it could be some other sensation, but there's some way that we experience it. And, it's going to be different for every person. The other thing about our inner critic is it gets a really bad rep. Like, it's just horrible and it's ruining our lives and it's self-sabotaging everything, but it actually has really good intentions. It's there to protect you, and it wants to keep you safe, and it really does want the best for you, even if it's, not helping at the moment. And so where the inner critic comes from is it's typically an overused skill or a strength. So for example, for me, I am I'm a recovering lots of things clearly, but I'm also a recovering perfectionist. And so, one of my values is excellence. I really believe in high quality. I really want to have an impact. I want, to be proud of the things that I'm doing. But it can get pushed to this next extra level, and that tends to be where the saboteur comes in. It can also be old patterns, right? So it can be perhaps it was something that you praised for either by your family, or maybe there's like a culture that you worked in at a company or in a country, or just, there's something that's really praised. And perhaps it worked really, really well for you before, but maybe it's not working for you anymore. So I forget who says this, but it's like, what got you here isn't going to get you there. It's like the same kind of concept. And again, the goal around our inner critic is that we're not looking to attack it, and we're not really looking to get rid of it either, because it's part of you, but it's more about how you can work with it. How do you identify it faster? And then for us high achievers, how do we not let it impact our performance? Because there's a huge hidden cost of our inner critic. Now, the first one here for me is like the biggest thing. So we've got we've got mental clutter and self-doubt. And so for me, what this looks like is just a lot of noise. And so for me, when my inner critic is active, what I notice is I start spinning out. And so I'll be stewing on something all day long for a week, however long. And what it does is it creates so much noise, and it's so draining that it actually prevents you from being productive, from moving forward with it, for figuring out how you're going to do it. So I think about, when I used to make mistakes or catch myself in a mistake, it was like I was so embarrassed. I couldn't believe I did that. And then, you're wasting a whole week because, you missed a decimal or something, which is so dumb. And then being in that creates a really high level of stress, right? So now you're just creating this extra stress. And because of this extra stress, you're becoming more reactive. So instead of being an intentional leader or being intentional in your life, you're now just reacting from this place of just, typically, when I think of reactive, there's some places where reactivity is great. When you're in an emergency, when you're in a crisis, when you do need to react really fast. But in like 89% of scenarios, you don't need to do that. And so, when our inner critic is really active, we tend to not really be that intentional anymore. We also might make slower decisions, right? So if you're spinning out about something and you're spinning out about it for a week, you might not be making a decision on it for a week because you can't figure out what to do. And all of these things, good question, Richard. I'll come to that in one sec. So all of these things can kind of create this burnout, right? So, and it can create health consequences, because what we know now about the body and stress is that stress is good. So like a normal amount of stress is actually good because it helps you grow. But if you have too much stress, it starts moving into health consequences. It becomes chronic stress, and basically the body doesn't know what to do with it. And so that's where we start having bad things happen. And then all of this will lead to strained relationships, because what happens is we're not really that pleasant to be around. We're probably trying to overactive everything, and just everything becomes really strained because, you're putting this pressure on yourself, and it's probably in turn then putting pressure on other people too. So, okay, so Richard's question is, what's the difference between inner critic and self-doubt? I don't know. It's a good question. I think now, I don't think this is like necessarily the right answer, but I'll talk about it from like maybe my perspective and maybe what I think about it, which is I would say like the inner critic is when you're sort of like, what? I could see that I'm seeing like a Venn diagram in my head where like I could see where both of them are there. So you have like the inner critic, which is basically your self-sabotage. And then you have self-doubt, which is like doubting yourself. And I guess, yeah, where would they be different? I guess self-doubt is like you're doubting your capabilities and doubting whether you could do something. Whereas I think your inner critic is telling you can't do something or you shouldn't do something. And I think, yeah, maybe it could be both. I'm curious, Richard, what you think and if you think they're different. Okay, so here's a quote from Kristen Neff, which is self-compassion means being gentle, kind, and understanding with yourself. And it's accepting that you're not perfect. And it's understanding that there is potential for learning and growth in every mistake that you make. I love this. I love Kristen Neff. And so the three components that she's been researching on self-compassion. So the first one is self-kindness. So this is all about being gentle, kind, and understanding to yourself. Number two, now I have this highlighted because I think when you are an overachiever, when you are someone who is a really high performer, it's this part that I think is probably the most important. At least it's the part that was the most important for me, which is recognizing that you're human. You're an imperfect human, just like every other human. And I love that because I think, when I look back to my superhero days, it's because I didn't realize that I was human and I didn't really acknowledge that part. And then the third thing is mindfulness. And so this is sort of bringing all of this into our awareness, into our experience. And so it's these three things together that really make up what self-compassion is. Now, I want to be really clear because this isn't about lowering the bar, which I think is really important because, again, if we're ambitious, we're high performers, like we want to do interesting work, we want to push the needle, we want to be ambitious, we want to do things. And so it's not about letting yourself off the hook. It's not about making excuses, and it's definitely not about lowering your standards. But what it is, it's about changing how you respond when your humanness shows up. And so, when you make that mistake, when you forget to do the thing, when you accidentally didn't attend the meeting that you should have because it was in your calendar, that you can see that and then just get up much faster. Like recognize that it's your humanness, take accountability for it, and then move on instead of letting yourself stew about it for 7 days. So there's many, many ways to practice self-compassion. But in terms of the webinar, I thought this would be the easiest to kind of talk about. So the first one is supportive touch. Now, I will be the first to say this is a little bit weird. Now, if one of your love languages is touch, this is going to be so good for you. But it's hugging yourself, it's touching yourself. And so, often we think with touch, you got to go hug another human. You need to sort of like rely on somebody else for that. But actually you can do it yourself. So what some of my clients do is they'll literally just hug themselves in a session. And I know for me, I'll take my hand, I'll put it on my heart sometimes and just be like, oh, Jen, how human of you. And so, and yours could look something else. It might be like hands on your thighs. It might be just rubbing your hands together, just some kind of a supportive touch to just let you know that you're there for yourself. Now, all these kind of work nicely together and they can be done independently. But the second one is taking a moment to pause and just checking in, like, how do I feel right now? I know often when I catch myself in a mistake, it's like, I'm so embarrassed. I can't believe I did that. That was stupid. And so sometimes this is checking in and just saying, okay, yeah, like I am embarrassed. I can't believe I did that. And just giving yourself a moment to just sort of be with that. And then from there, saying, okay, now that I, recognize my humanity and that I'm human and that I did this stupid thing, what do I want to actually do about it? And now the third part here is treating yourself like a friend. This can be really important because, most of us talk to ourselves, or maybe it's not talk, it's feel if your saboteur is anything like mine. But I would never make someone else feel like I make myself feel. And so part of it is thinking about, what would I like? How would I treat a friend if they did the same thing? How would I react to them? And I really love you've already heard me say this a few times, but how human of you. I love that one because that's what I often say to myself, like, how human of me to do that. And so, using kinder words, catching yourself if, you are saying mean things, or, if you're feeling, sometimes if yours is a feeler like mine, it's kind of like, oh, like, I feel you. I feel, all this pressure here. Like, it's okay. We don't need to put this much pressure on. And as we get to learn to work with our inner critic, and I will say, I think this is like a lifelong journey. I don't think this is something that you leave this webinar today and you're like, oh my goodness, guess what? I learned how to master my inner critic, because I think it's something we keep coming back to. But over time, we get better at operating under pressure. You start making better decisions with greater intention and groundedness. And as you make mistakes, because you will, they don't derail your progress or define your leadership. And so overall, what happens is you just become a more effective leader. And so what this looks like in your team, so this is what it looks like as you start taking off this cape, giving yourself permission not to have the cape, letting other people in. This is where self-compassion becomes a leadership skill, not just a soft skill. And so part of this is remembering your own humanity when you're making a mistake, and letting it be just like a small 30-second blip instead of it being something that you're spinning out about all day. And as you do that, you start modeling that for your team, that mistakes are human. And so guess what? They also stop spinning out. And, this isn't just with your team. Like, I do this with my family now too. And I notice that now that I don't react so crazy, they don't either. And so now we just laugh when we make mistakes. And by doing this, we create a culture of learning and growth for everyone. And as we start leaning more and more into self-compassion, our capacity for dealing with hard things increases because we don't let the hard thing be the end of the story. And so it's no longer causing as much high stress. You're no longer having the same health issues, and your team or your family, whoever you want to add into this, feels more comfortable talking to you. And overall, you just become a more relatable human and leader because everybody makes mistakes. And so when you can sort of take off the superhero cape and let other people know that you're just human, they're like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I had no idea you made mistakes too. This is great. And so a couple of resources, Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff. Highly, highly, highly recommend this book. I will say it was a bit of a hard one. I actually did a book club on this last year, and all of us had agreed that without the book club, I don't know we would have fully gotten through the book because it's a little dry sometimes and just tough sometimes, but it's such a good read. There are so many good things in there. And then there's also the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion. So they actually do donation-based classes, kind of like a yoga class, but it's like a self-compassion class. And so they have lots of different exercises and techniques. I think it's like an hour. They have so many different times set up throughout the week that you can sort of like jump in and just practice some of these different practices and see what works. So yeah, I think that's it for my content. So
Jen, thank you so much for sharing all that great content. And so I could see in the chat that Richard and others were really reflecting on what you had to share. I know it reminded me of, you cited Marshall Goldsmith's book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it reminded me of how Sally Helgeson, international women's leadership expert, challenged him and said, oh, I think you didn't quite get it right for women leaders. And she said one thing she learned by collaborating on a book with him to address that gap is that he would make lots of mistakes and he would just say, oh, well, I'm human, I make mistakes. And she put a sticky on her monitor to remind herself to say, oh, well, when she made mistakes that were not as big as Marshall's mistakes, but she just had to approach it with self-compassion like you were sharing. So now we want to invite everyone that is participating to consider being a volunteer. She can engage in a meaningful conversation. And some of you have already been doing it on the chat. So maybe you want to volunteer to come on camera and a microphone to talk with Jen directly, and consent to being recorded, because we are recording this webinar. We want to have other people that aren't able to be with us live to have a chance to be exposed to this content and make a change in their lives. So if you'd like to volunteer, you can just put in the chat that I volunteer, and then we'll give you instructions about how to come on camera with Jen and get some one-on-one coaching with her. So we really hope you do that. And let me specifically invite Richard or Demo to join us on camera. I know you've been very active in the chat, and we hope you'll be able to talk with Jen too. So just, if you're up for it, just put I volunteer in the chat. And Jen, I was thinking about that question that was posed about self-doubt and inner critic. Now that maybe we can discuss it a little bit while people are thinking about volunteering. Again, please put I volunteer in the chat if you're up for it. But I think maybe the, oh, great, Richard, thank you for volunteering. And my colleague Carl will be letting you know how to join us live. Thank you, Carl. And maybe a difference between inner critic and self-doubt is like self-doubt might be, can I do it? And maybe people that are sabotaged by inner critic believe they can do almost anything. And then when they don't live up to those unrealistic expectations, then the inner critic zooms in and says, look, you didn't live up to the superhero expectations that you have for yourself. I don't know. That's what came to mind for me. I'll give you a chance to react to that.
I love that. No, I thought that was genius. That was so well worded, Michael. I think, yeah, I love that. I don't know what I would add to that, but no, I could see that, because it's like, I think that's what happens is, we almost create this vision in our head that, that we are superheroes. And then, yeah, when you don't live up to it, it's really hard to be under that pressure.
And I think, speaking for myself, I was sharing some of my experiences at the FBI. I was working there, post 9/11, and it was a really challenging time where all of our team, wanted to make sure they protected the United States from whatever the next terrorist threat might be. And it was driving a lot of us to excel. And if you're a high-performing leader, and Marshall Goldsmith writes about this too, you think you believe in yourself. You have a lot of confidence. He's like, hey, I can figure it out. I can do it. And we take on more and more until I know this is the point when I was crashing and burning. And then I reached out to, thank goodness I had a mentor there that I could reach out to, and he helped me pull out of the nosedive and come back up. So it's good that when you can reach out. Give your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I think if you can, I think, I was just reading something yesterday by Deb Dana, who does a lot of research around the nervous system. And I guess co-regulation is one of the principles of the polyvagal theory. And so I think that's it. I think it's part of it is, I think a lot of this gets activated because we're so alone in what we're going through, and because we're not sharing that experience with other people. Whereas I think when we can actually feel like we can be more authentic and actually connect with others and learn to rely on them and learn to be able to have like real open conversations about it, I do think it helps a lot, because I think you realize you connect in your common humanity with somebody else. And then because you don't feel as alone, that thing might not quite be as big or as detrimental or as chaotic. So yeah, I think there's a lot of power in that.
Thanks. That's good advice, Jen. If you can, bring yourself to reach out, and there's probably people that are willing to help. Even there were the super friends, right? You superheroes have friends too that can reach out.
Yeah. And you know
sometimes
what? Yeah,
Superman couldn't handle it by himself, so you have to reach out to Batman or Wonder Woman or something.
Totally. 100%. And also, it's so interesting because it's, it took a lot. It was really hard for me to start setting down that superhero cape. But man, I tell you, it's been such a game changer in my life to do so and to actually like find ways. I mean, it's taken me like 4 years to even, get to where I am now, and still lots of work to do. But it just, the deepness in your relationships becomes really amazing. It's pretty wild.
Yeah, while we're giving Richard a chance to sign on and join us, I think we had another comment saying maybe this material hits men and women differently. And I think Sally Helgeson talked about that with Marshall Goldsmith and their How Women Rise book, that maybe there's some different socialization in some countries where it could affect how we have that inner critic. I don't know if you've found any differences between men and women and your clients or other work you've done.
Yeah, yeah, some of the conversations that I've had too with like other coaches and also just like with family members and what I've seen is I think there are differences because I think also like women tend to be a little bit more praised for vulnerability and openness and just kind of like have that, whereas I feel like for men, they're praised for being strong and stoic. And so sometimes, being more vulnerable, sharing emotions can be really tough because there's so much conditioning around being strong and stoic, not realizing that strong and stoic and emotional and vulnerable are also just different, strengths. And I think like Brene Brown's work and so many others have started opening this up, these conversations up more. But I think there's a lot of conditioning specifically for men around this that makes it harder.
Yeah, I definitely felt when I worked at the FBI, it was more of a male culture. Wasn't a type of group that I thought it would be good for me to start crying. But it's a really healthy thing to have an emotional release. And,
Yes.
and sometimes men cut themselves off from that type of release.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Because again, there's like weakness or something like that associated with it.
Sounds like we've got Richard, so I'm going to go off camera and let you guys go to it.
Amazing. And how much time do we have, Michael? I should do a time check.
We have about 8 to 10 minutes.
Okay. Amazing. Richard, thanks so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah. So what do you wanna talk about?
What do I want to talk about?
Yeah. What do you want to do for
Well,
coaching?
yeah, I think, oh man, there would be so much context to give, but I will skip because we have 8 minutes. But the superhero, that was me, still ingrained. But man, the crash, I think I'm learning all this after I crashed. I think I was not say, hey, you're a superhero. That could happen to you. Just a bit of context. I used to be an executive in a bank, one of the top bank in the States. And last year, the whole world collapsed. And I'm not just talking about the work part, layoffs and everything. Layoffs led to superheroes going to say, I'm gonna rebuild this very quickly. Family situation, health, and stress. I think. Oh man, where would I start about what I want to be able to ask you? How do you get the gender thing? It's really important because I haven't been a very crashing male superhero for a year and a half now. I went to support groups and I went to everything you said actually resonates with me. And most of the time I was the only man. Participation of men was about 10%. And for myself, I know why. I mean, I used to be in the military, high performer. I used to do sports. I used to get after it, like we say all the time. So if you would talk to me about hugging myself, forget it. That doesn't work. So how would you try to reach to men like me before they crash? Now you would reach out to me and I would give you a hug and I would give myself a hug. How would you try to reach out to those superheroes? And there's women like that too, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to, but how would you try to reach out to people like that who hugging, not a topic? How would you bring self-compassion to them? given
Yeah.
their very hardcore soft skills. Like, how could you open that window with them to start paying attention to themselves as vulnerable superheroes?
Yeah. What a good question. The first thing I think I want to say is um, a lot of my male clients say the same thing. So I just want to share that because like you're not alone in that. Is I do think that, I had one of my male clients was literally like, why am I like whenever I'm doing group things, they're like, why am I always the only guy in here? Like, is it weird that I'm here? Like, no, it's amazing that you're here. And so because we're doing coaching, I'm gonna throw this question back to you. So having been through it, what do you think?
Well, so again, what I would have wished is that I would have been open to learn about self-hugging before I crashed, which wasn't meant to be that. It's like, Richard is very, I'm French Canadian, so Richard is a very stubborn man, stubborn superhero. So it would have been very difficult to anybody to say, pay attention to your emotions. For me, it's like, yeah, I'm stressed, but I can do this. I do sports, I do hard things. So what got me to open to this, unfortunately, was too late. The damage was done. The superhero was like, the cape was burning. He went down on the ground and he realized he wasn't Superman anymore and lost in the process. So after the fact of the consequences, surrendering was what got me to hug myself. At some point, I was like a devastated, crushed, super humbled superhero, and I had nothing more to lose as that kind of person to say, screw it, I'm surrendering. Where should I go? Here's a
Yeah,
group for
like
you. And
now
then
I'm
I show
open.
up, right? And then I went to the group and I was like, oh, man, this is even more humbling. I'm the only man here. And everybody's thinking more on the hugging, and I still didn't have overcome that. So
There.
surrendering was the secret sauce here. But again, it was too late. It was after it happened. And I don't know how it would have been to surrender while I was still flying with my cape. I don't
Mhm.
know what would have convinced me. And sometimes now in retrospect, I'm thinking, if somebody would have shown me somebody like me after the consequences as a male superhero, then maybe it would have shocked me while I'm flying with my cape. Maybe I would have said, holy crap, like, seriously, it happened to you? Maybe if I would have been exposed to that, I would have been, dude, like, this guy's kind of like you, and look what happened to him.
Yeah. We need more
So
models.
more models, for sure, for sure. Yep.
Did you realize that? Anything coming to mind for you?
Well, yes, for those superheroes that have a certain type of personality, it could be a superwoman and be geared like exactly like that. So it's just a male thing. It's like, how do we expose that to them? Because they're not going to look for it. It's not like I would have been looking for crashing superheroes before. So it's like, how do we bring that to them? Exposure to them in a way to say, you're still successful, but let's just look at this a little bit. It won't
Yeah.
hurt you. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think that would have done for you?
Well, done correctly, it would have like told me, because most superheroes I met in the professional world, they're smart people. So when they see something extremely factual, unfortunately, hugging is not factual, I think, for us.
Yeah.
But if I would have seen somebody that would have a background very factual, very similar, and that person would have gone, sometime it could have been with a tube, It's not pretty, but it's like could have been a tube in their neck, could have been, they look like you can tell you can tell their cape has burned while they're telling you who they are. I would have been shocked in a way that would say, you can't ignore this. This person is too much like you, and you can't ignore trying to understand how that person got there. And part of that model also is, and I will say this very carefully, superheroes, we think we can overcome anything. And what I've learned as a crash superhero is that no superhero, I don't care if you're an executive, a CEO, life will remind you you don't control everything. It will remind you, even if you think you can solve pretty much anything because you're a very successful superhero, life will remind you that this is just not true. And seeing a superhero or used to think like that would have opened my eyes. It would have scared me, quite frankly, but that's okay. Because I think, I don't know about Superman, but I'm sure Superman at some point got the scared of his life. So that's what I think. It's trying to find ways to bring those flying superhero with very large ego to sit down for a few minutes and see one of them, trying to, not to tell them what to do, but to say, hey, pay attention. That could happen to anybody.
I love your passion, and I really admire your vulnerability.
Thank you.
And I wish we had more time to dig into this because there's so many ways we could go. But as we have to wrap this up, I'm wondering, is there anything that you're taking away from these 7 minutes?
Yes. If you're a superhero, there's some Jen around, there's some Michael around. Bring them on your team. You don't have to accept the hugging and everything, but bring one of those. And I'm not paid by Michael or Jen. I don't even know Leadership Coach Group, but if you're a superhero, if you're smart, bring one of those people on your team. You may not like what they're going to say, you may not believe in it, but have them in your corner because what they offer will serve you. I've seen it for a year and a half. It will serve you and hopefully will prevent you to crash like I did. So that's my message. That's the takeaway for me.
Amazing. Thank you, Richard, so much for coming on live. Thank you so much for your vulnerability and your openness.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for your work.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Jen. And Richard, you're being that role model right now for other men maybe that are tuning in and or women that you can be vulnerable, and maybe it's a cautionary tale that you're sharing. For me, what helped me is also having someone that I respected as an assistant director at the FBI, a former police chief. Get a shout out to him, Lou Kios, who I thought would be receptive to what I said, wouldn't be judgmental, and would actually help. And he did all those things. But I trusted that that would be the case, and I could be vulnerable and go to him, and that he would receive me that way. So you sharing like this, I think, put yourself out there too, that others can have confidence that they'll be received well if they reach out for help. So thank you so much, Richard, for being brave and doing that for us today.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And one thing I would probably recommend, if you're a superhero and you are one of those that's either crashed or you are crashing, because sometimes it's like you're in the process of, go meet other superheroes. Help them, like you said, Michael, right? So I'm trying to find ways to do that. It's new for me, but now I'm at a point where I'm on the ground, my cape is burned, but now it's like, how can I help superheroes? That's really something, Michael, thank you so much, because you're encouraging me to pursue trying to find how I can help them the best I can.
You're like a phoenix rising, Richard.
Well, I'm careful about the word rising, because rising would mean that I have a new cape and I'm going to fly again as a superhero. I'd rather say I'm a phoenix, grounded, walking on the earth.
Love it. So good.
But
and that grounding is a position of strength where you can help hold up others. So thank you for that, Richard.
Thank you.
All right. So we hope that you found this experience very valuable, and there's more opportunities as well. So first, we want to remind you, you'll be getting a message, or you can go to our website, and Carl, maybe you can put up our website address where they can find these resources as well, or you can scan this code right here, and that'll give you everything about this webinar and to continue your practice. You get the playbook, you can access the call with Jen. So Richard, if you want to continue that conversation, Jen's available to you, or anyone else that sees this broadcast. You'll get a copy of the webinar slide deck and the recording that we pledged to get up by the end of the day on Monday. And you also can sign up for our regular updates on our future webinars. So please scan this code now. We'd love to have you take advantage of all these different resources. And of course, we welcome your feedback. We're always trying to improve our service to you. And we have another code that you can scan here to give us feedback on this webinar. And we meet right after the webinar and do an after action review. So if you're able to get this in the next few minutes, we'll look at your feedback live with Jen in our after action review. Even if you get it to us later, we'll also look at it. But if you do it right now, it'll be very valuable to us as we do our after action review, as we do after every webinar. So we encourage you to share that feedback to that QR code. I'm hesitant to move to the next slide. I'll give you one more moment to whip out your phone and scan that code. And next month, we have Back to School, Creating a Culture of Learning and Leadership at Home. And your presenter will be yours truly. I'm going to try to share some of the lessons that I learned from my family. Don't claim to have the corner on being a super dad, but just to share some lessons that I've learned at home and learned from working with my family members. So stay tuned for more updates on that. That's coming Friday, September 4th at noon Eastern time. So I hope you can join us for that. As a reminder, we're here for you. This is our telephone number. You can call us. This is our email address for myself and my colleague Maya, and our website address. So there's access to lots of different resources and also how to contact us. Thank you for putting up that feedback QR code again, Carl. I want to give a special shout out to Carl. She's the one that leads the organizing our webinar series. You see how well she did today. Thank you, Carl, for all you do. Maya is our business development manager. She's great. If you want to reach out to her and take advantage of our resources, or you can contact myself. And I want to give a special shout out to Jen for presenting today. I hope you're able to practice what you preach, because you're super, even though you ditched the cape and collecting the dust up there, being vulnerable and being able to encourage people like Richard. Richard, we want to give you a special thanks for being vulnerable and being a good role model for others that are trying to let go of that cape as well. So, and thank you to all of you for joining us live, and those who are watching the webinar. We'd love to hear from you, your feedback, or if there's any other support we can have. And we really encourage you to take advantage of scheduling some time with Jen. She's fantastic. I was so excited to see you coaching live like that, Jen. I was like, oh, she's great. I don't often get to see our coaches coach live of that outside our webinar, so it was wonderful to see you do that. So please take advantage of all these resources. We're providing them for you. They're free. We'd love you to incorporate them into your life, and that's part of our mission, to serve you. So thank you all for joining us. Please reach out if we can be any service to you. Take care.
Thank you so much for having me too.
Thank you, Jen.